All right, Eduardo. So back to people buying investment properties here. Here is a question. If I'm buying 3 properties in Cabo and have the expectation to possibly purchase more, does it make sense to open up an SRL, an LLC here in Mexico instead of individual fideicomisos for each property?
It's a very good question. It just depends on the nature of the investments. If your investments are solely residential in nature, in the sense that you really do not have any type of desire to rent it out, to have some sort of commercial component associated to that tenure, let's say you're having this house as a second home and you sometimes want to come down to the beach in Cabo and have a second home, I would obviously advise against having a Mexican SRL, which is Sociedad de Responsabilidad Limitada. You phrased it well, and it is a limited liability company in Mexico. It qualifies under U.S. tax law as a partnership. The SRL does, instead of an SA, Sociedad Anónima, which doesn't. So in that sense, it's easier for sophisticated buyers to have this type of structure in place in Mexico. It gives you the advantage of avoiding the setting up of the trust, or fideicomiso, the Spanish word for it, and it avoids the annual carrying costs of a residential trust, because you have the acceptance fee, which is around $500, plus the annual fee, which is another $500. So they normally request 2 years in advance when they set up the trust. So you're out there $1,500 US just on trustee fees, plus around anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 of the permit process to get a permit from the Ministry of Foreign Relations in Mexico City. Because under the foreign investment law, you require a permit from the Ministry of Foreign Relations. So going back to the need or the convenience of having a Mexican limited liability company, the SRL, it again depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're mentioning several properties, I'm guessing not all of them will be residential in nature, in the sense of not having just people stay there free of charge because it's a corporate perk or because it's family property, and you sometimes come down with extended family and you have a couple of homes here. That would basically be my recommendation, to have individual trust or fideicomisos for those. However, if you do have a desire to invest and have people, for example, an Airbnb with a proper lease agreement, whether it be a short-term lease or a long-term lease, then you have an argument for Mexican tax purposes to say, look, we're not avoiding the trust for avoiding the trust. We're doing this because it makes more sense for our actual business, which is renting it out. It doesn't have to be fully rented every single day of the year, but we obviously have to show that. And what the Mexican government wants is simply payment of taxes, which makes sense. And not only that, the Hotel Association is all for it, because the Hotel Association said, hey, these people that are renting their homes out, we're paying taxes, we're paying payroll, we're paying all these types of fees with our business, and then people just have an individual house and they rent it out with no payment of taxes. And so if they do have the proper setup, the SRL will provide you 2 things, Fletcher, which is the actual barcoded Mexican official invoice or factura for the stay. And so that is how you get the income reported to the Mexican authorities. So taxes is also going to be a component to take into consideration regarding these types of transactions going forward. And it all depends, again, on the nature of those investments. And you can also probably, if you have several homes that's just going to be residential, you might even ask for a discount for the trustee to get you that. But again, it all depends on what you're trying to do. And avoiding the trustee just for avoidance sake might get you into trouble. But again, that's one of the reasons we are here to recommend the proper investment channels.
So just to recap, if you are 100% looking to invest, and you're buying 2 or 3 properties and you might add like 1 a year, and this is just you're diversifying out of assets in the United States, an SRL could be a very good option.
It is a good option, and obviously it also involves the commercial aspect. And I want to stress the fact of commercial as opposed to residential, because if you have those items in place for investment, just for the sake of appreciation of certain assets, and let's say that Mexican investment in realty is going to do better than the stock market in the US, for example, that's not the reason enough to go into the SRL. But if you have a structure where you basically say, okay, it's kind of like a holding company, and say we will have these assets into the company with the membership interests into this divided in these properties, then it does make sense, because you avoid these additional carrying costs and the red tape associated with getting the trust in place.